Welcome, Cassie. You are here for a very intimate webinar with Evan and Reshelle. Happy to have you here. We're going to get this kicked off shortly, and I think we should have some more folks joining us. While we wait to get this started, if anyone has any questions, Cassie, if you have any questions or things you're looking to learn during this webinar, go ahead and pose those in the chat, and we'll try to make sure they're addressed either during the presentation or during the Q&A portion. But thank you for joining. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. I'm Chris Olson, lead conference content program at MJBizCon. This webinar is AI and PR: How Artificial Intelligence is Reshaping the Cannabis Industry Now. Artificial intelligence is changing the way cannabis companies communicate with the market, from drafting more efficient press releases to monitoring sentiment in real time and sharpening media outreach. AI is giving marketers, publicists, and founders new ways to move faster and work smarter. At the same time, cannabis remains a uniquely complex industry where compliance, platform restrictions, and reputational risk demand a more careful approach than in many other sectors. Today's conversation will focus on how communications teams can use AI for scale without losing the judgment, accuracy, and industry awareness that strong cannabis PR requires. And as the industry continues to evolve, so do the opportunities to connect in person. We're excited to share that the MJBizCon agenda is now live with programming designed to help you stay ahead of the trends shaping cannabis business, media, and marketing. The MJBizCon early bird registration rate expires on June 25th, so now is the time to review the agenda and secure your registration at the lowest price offered. I've included a link in the chat for anyone interested. Today, we're joined by two excellent speakers who bring valuable perspectives to this conversation. Both of our featured speakers have presented at MJBizCon and provided insightful content. I'll introduce our speakers and then we'll dive into the topic. First, we have Rachelle Gordon, editor of GreenState. Rachelle is an award-winning cannabis journalist who began her cannabis writing career in 2015. Host of the Cannabis Awards at the State Fair, which will be happening in July, so to make sure to check that out. She's an Emerald Cup judge and a Buddhist critic, and her work has appeared in High Times, Cannabis Now, Beard Bros, MG, Skunk, amongst many others. Rachelle was named Cannabis Journalist of the Year at the 2025 MJs and earned the Community Cultivator Trophy at the 2024 Women's Canna Awards. She brings a deep understanding of cannabis media and storytelling, along with a particular interest in how cannabinoids may benefit people living with neurological conditions and autism spectrum disorder. Next, we have Evan Nison, founder of NisonCo. Evan is a cannabis PR pioneer and the founder of NisonCo, a firm that connects leaders in the legal cannabis, medical marijuana, and hemp industries with influential journalists across the U.S. and around the globe. He is the youngest member of the NORML Board of Directors and also sits on the Board of Directors for Students for Sensible Drug Policy. His advocacy runs deep. He ran college outreach for California's Prop 19 legalization initiative across more than 40 schools, helped pass the New York Good Samaritan law and the state's medical marijuana law. He also pressed Hillary Clinton for a firm answer on legalization during a live town hall on ABC's Good Morning America in 2016. Evan has also built socially driven cannabis businesses, co-founding Whoopi and Maya with Whoopi Goldberg, along with Emerald Farm Tours and Bloody Good Vape and Smoke. His work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, Politico, Forbes, and Bloomberg TV, amongst others. So Rachelle and Evan will explore actionable ways cannabis marketers, publicists, and founders can apply AI across communications platforms, from content development and media targeting to reputation tracking and response planning. Let's get started. Evan and Rachelle, take it away.
Thanks so much, Chris. And thank you so much for having me. And Evan, this is really an exciting and yet somewhat controversial topic. And I know, Evan, you've been doing so much work on the AI side. So I was excited and a little nervous and trepidatious to be in this webinar, but I'm glad that we are, so we can talk openly and candidly about AI and what it is, what it isn't, how we're both using it, how we're not using it, and how it is impacting our industry, both for good and bad. So I want to start with just kind of talking a little bit high level about, where we both are on the AI spectrum. Evan, you and I have been friends for a long time, and I feel like you're way further down the road when it comes to AI than I am for multiple reasons. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from your perspective, what you've been building, what you've been seeing, and what you've been experimenting with when it comes to AI.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've dove sort of head first in for a bunch of reasons, like you say. Like one, I'm just techie by nature. I've always sort of loved tech, and so I naturally was drawn to it throughout my life. I got drones, self-driving car, 3D printers, all of that. I've always been that way. And at the same time, as I think everybody watching this will probably know, the cannabis industry experienced a boom and bust. And as a PR firm, we probably rode that harder than anyone, both the top and the bottom. We marketing budgets got pulled quickly. PR is the first to go out of those usually. So I had a shrinking budget and a shrinking team as AI was becoming powerful. And so it was really a no-brainer from my standpoint to dive in. And now at this point, I still have, of course, a team of humans, but AI is doing a huge chunk of what my formerly 26 employees used to do. So from like literally everything, like it helps me manage my emails in the morning. There's a whole system for blogging. Um, I'm setting up an email marketing program right now. It does my payroll, starting to do bookkeeping, a lot of the admin work, sorting my mail, and now actually dealing with my mail. So in terms of an agency, basically everything that humans were doing, it is pretty much doing other than actual client management. Um, and in terms of PR, it's doing a lot as well. It's doing a lot of reporter research, not all the outreach. We still have humans doing the outreach, but it's very much assisted by AI. And it's also, AI is changing very quickly the mix of tools that we use for outreach. So like instead of Muckrack as an example, like we're finding Claude to be as good at research paired with ChatGPT. So it's also reducing some of our expenses on the tool side. To not just
Got
to
it.
like
Yeah,
throw it
I
out
mean,
there, but I'm curious about you. I mean, obviously, it's a very different side, right? Like you're as a reporter, it's you're probably getting a lot of the junk, and experiencing more of the downsides than I am at this point, because a lot of people are lazy with it also. So I'd be curious as well, like the same,
yeah,
how you're
I
using
mean,
it.
for me, it's tough in media because AI is dramatically shifting how people receive my content and journalist content, right? The game of SEO has changed completely, and the algorithm, so to speak, is not necessarily delivering my content in the way that it used to, which is problematic. And I'm not going to dance around that. Traffic is down to a lot of publishers' websites, if not most. And so that's a problem. And so what we have to do is change the way that we're thinking about AI and the content that we are delivering and putting out there in the world, because it's so much more of a human focused and human centered content that we have to be delivering. Um, but however, it can be really useful too. I mean, there's no doubt that cannabis media, we're all very lean teams. I'm a team of one person, and one person cannot do everything. And so I will say that having access to tools, especially around content planning. So for example, I can have AI run an analysis of our traffic over the last 3 to 6 months and see which topics are hitting and which ones aren't, and compare that to, trending topics on Google. Like that's been really, really helpful. And I started thinking about it, and actually I have been using AI for longer than I thought. I mean, even the transcription service that I use is AI, right? And so I realized I've actually been deploying it in different sort of ways to make my job a little easier. I used to spend so much time going back and forth on transcripts, trying to type everything out. Now I can run it through AI. It does a decent job. I can go back and verify. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely problematic in a lot of ways in the media side, but it's also been really useful and made things a lot more efficient for lean teams. I will say that. Um, and so speaking about that, especially on the SEO side, right? I mean, that's changed dramatically, and I know you've created a lot of tools for that. Can you describe them a little bit more to me? Because I'm actually really curious too about what you're working on.
Yeah, for sure. And SEO, you're totally right. The game has changed a lot. Even from like yesterday, I had 2 leads on my calendar. One came from ChatGPT and one came from Claude. Neither of them actually probably hit our website. Maybe they hit our website to contact us, but before they sort of made their decision before going to our website, like through the conversations. And I have a couple of questions for you too, but like with what you just said in terms of web traffic, but the way that we're dealing with that is really just, which I'll explain, writing good AI blogs and a lot of them. So we're trying to make up for that difference with just sheer content, and then writing better blogs than people who are using AI in a lazy way. So as an example, I created a tool. It connects to WordPress, Shopify, Google Search Console, Google Analytics, and it also has SEO data built into it, like a Moz type of competitor. And it will take your brand voice. You can import your brand voice through, because it connects to your website, so it can sort of analyze all your existing blogs and content. You save your brand voice. It will do 10 to 15 minutes of research with ChatGPT on the specific topic that you put in. And then Gemini will do SEO research because it's owned by Google. And then we have Claude with your brand voice actually write the blog. So it has internal links, external links, well researched. It's fact checked by another fact checking layer. And by the time it gets online, we still have to make some edits to it, but generally the blogs have gone from 3 to 5 hours to 5 minutes, and we're getting the same, or honestly even better content out of it. And then we're also optimizing our pages a lot more through that same tool. It's connected to Search Console, so with the click of a button, it will look at that page's web traffic and then optimize that page to reflect that web traffic better. So it'll maybe update like the meta tags and the titles and the content to better reflect what people are searching for. So we definitely have to stay on top of the ball, but we are able to mitigate some of the traffic loss. But for us, we need to get people to contact us. For you, it's different because you actually need people on your site to get the advertisement. So I'm really curious if there is a way to even combat that, or if you found a way or experimented with that.
Yes, we definitely are thinking more about how people are getting to our content, and a lot of folks aren't even really using Google anymore. I mean, obviously it remains the dominant search force, but more people are searching on Claude or ChatGPT for their answers, or even Reddit. And so we are optimizing, to see what information the robot prefers, to see if we can get in front of them. And so we have been dedicating resources to that, and also just trying to find our consumers in different ways, leaning more into social media, leaning into Reddit, where are the people that we want to connect with, because they're not necessarily all on Google, and that can't be the only lane to get to work. And frankly, the media landscape has shifted so much over the last few years that AI or not, you really have to be everywhere. And you can't just assume that Google will serve up your content to whoever's searching for it. That strategy just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I know we're going to be talking about the future and predictions, but all of this is going to dramatically, I mean, like you said, even before AI and without AI, the media landscape is shifting, which we've both seen, but this is going to speed that up. And I really I cannot picture a media landscape in 5 years looking anything like it does now. Like but yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or you want to talk that later, but it's definitely going to have a big impact.
Yeah, no, it already has. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But like I said, it can be good and it can be bad. And I'm grateful for the information that it's delivering to people and how people can dive in. I know you've been doing so much amazing research, and it sounds like it's been a lot more making businesses more efficient. And I think that's important, especially in an industry with such slim margins to begin with, right? Like we have to figure out ways for our industry to thrive. And perhaps this is one of them, especially folks who are trying to get their content and their messaging in front of folks like me. So I'm curious, about some of those tools that you're building, if you can maybe dive a little bit deeper into that and how you're actually using these tools and delivering them to your clients.
For sure. So, I mean, really what my suggestion is changing also, like AI is also changing, even faster than the media landscape. And I was building a lot of custom tools, like I was explaining, like sort of custom software, and I still am doing a lot of that. And I believe firmly that software is going to be very cheap and probably completely customized in the next few years. There's going to be very little out of the box software that people want to subscribe to. But even more recently, I'm starting to use Claude as sort of like an agentic layer, like sort of like an agentic assistant, an AI assistant, and giving Claude as many abilities and skills and connections as I can. So as an example, it will every morning check my emails and Slack messages and Fireflies and tell me if I missed anything or if I need to respond to anything and help me. And it's only able to do that because it knows my brand voice. It knows that I want it to do that, and it has those connections. So now a lot of the times I'm actually building tools for Claude. So as an example, I built a PR tool that is software, like you can log into it, and it will, initially we built it for reviewers because it's hard to find reviewers in social media. Actually, ironically, there was I don't know if it's ironically, but funny, we had a client who really wanted OnlyFans reviewers because they're cannabis friendly, and we needed to build a tool specifically to find cannabis friendly OnlyFans creators. So we wound up building that, expanding on it, and it's now all social media platforms. And also reviewers. So it's got product reviewers and also a reporter section. And we can run really good searches, like really, really detailed searches. The way that works is first it'll do a pass to find all of the reporters or reviewers, and then you can run deep research on them all to find their actual emails. And that's great. But what I now did is I built a custom Claude connector. So now Claude does all that for me. I can say, research these reporters, and it will do that, and it will help with outreach and put emails in my draft folder. As an example, for a PR example, actually, I was out to dinner with my dad, who wrote a book when I was a kid. That was like a bestseller, and people knew him back then, but people don't really know him as much anymore. And so at dinner I said, you should do some PR. We should get you some some interviews with people with social media followings. So I use Dispatch to message Claude, which is different than Claude Chat. If anybody cares, I can go into that different time. And I said, put together a list of people who would be likely to interview him that have large social media followings. It got 120. I had it categorize them, rank them by most likely to be an easy interview and like a friendly interview. And then reached out to the first 20, and we got 3 interviews. I used Opus, which is like a really good model, and I had it double and triple check itself. But that's an example of, at dinner, literally, we did reporter research, multiple layers of reporter research and outreach, and got multiple interviews that he wound up doing successfully. And none of those reporters were annoyed from what I could tell. Like, we got positive reviews. The emails were actually really nuanced. They mentioned like prior articles that they mentioned his work in, type of thing. But the top level thing that I want everyone to understand is Claude as your AI assistant, and giving Claude the skills and resources needed to do the work. Whether you're talking about SEO or PR, that's really the direction that everything is heading in my opinion.
Right. And I always say, and I said it in our pre-panel call, about how, AI is the intern, right? But you really have to train it specifically, and then potentially it could, move up in your company, so to speak. And that's really interesting what you were just saying, because I feel like there could be a misconception, especially among journalists, and maybe not, because perhaps some are using similar tools to you, that, like we're just getting these mass, AI written press releases with AI written quotes. And I'm sure there's a lot of that happening, because I know that I get them. But it sounds like you're using the tool in a lot more useful and thoughtful sort of way.
Yeah, for sure. And just like we talked about on the pre-call, I think there's a really big difference between people who use how you can use AI, right? Like you can use it in a way that's very lazy and pisses people off, or you can use it really creatively. Like I mentioned to some people in here, like I literally found novel black hole math using AI as someone who doesn't know physics or math. Like it's confirmed by two human physicists. So you can be really creative and do really good work with AI, or you can be really lazy. And piss people off. Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword, just like it is from a policy standpoint. Like before I really talked up AI and how much I'm using it, but um, I am a policy guy, and you mentioned like I am very worried about where things could be going from a public policy standpoint. Um, but yeah, that could be a different top conversation potentially.
Yeah, and some of the tools that we're using, I would say, are similar. So there's this really great tool where it basically scrubs all of the city council and state legislative meetings. It's all public record. And so if you're looking for a certain subject, say cannabis, right, you can actually train this model to scrub all of this data. So if someone talks about cannabis in a state legislature meeting, you can have access to that data immediately. Like that's super useful. Or we have a lot of really broad policies and really nuanced policies too at our company, both for ethics and legal. And so I can literally load all of that into a GPT. And if a story feels sticky, I can flag it, right? With that saying, hey, is there anything in here that could be problematic from our side that we need to dig deeper into? That's really, really useful. But as far as like the AI generated content, I feel like that's where things get a little bit more controversial, a little more sticky. So I would love to hear you talk about that because I know that you and I kind of like we didn't disagree, but we had I think a good conversation in our pre-panel call about that, about the actual AI created content. We don't do any of that at our company, and it's all strictly more for research and for administrative tasks. But I do know that people are using AI to create content in their own voice. So I wonder if you could get a little bit deeper into that.
For sure, yeah. And um, like we talked about on the call too, like I kind of view it like very much like an employee. Like I've always had, not always, but for the last many years, I had a team, and most of my writing was done, frankly, by my team with my guidance. Right, I'd say I want to write about this. Can you write it? And the ideas still are mine, but AI very much drafts almost everything that I send out, even my emails now. But it's all in my brand voice. It's all in my voice, and I review all of it, like every single word of everything in my name. Not every word of everything on every blog, but we go through a process to make sure it's double checked, and all of the facts related to PR, SEO are checked by somebody in their field. If that makes sense. So like the SEO blogs are run through by the SEO team, and they will make any last minutes changes. But I don't view it as long as the quality is good. I view it very much like a writing team. And the way that I make the quality good is what I said before, is just have a process. So I'll use all of the models for what they're best at. ChatGPT is usually best for research. So I have it do research memos. And then I'll have Gemini do SEO research. And then I have Claude with my brand voice, whether it's through that tool that I talked about, that blog tool I made, or whether it's in my actual Claude desktop app and I trained a skill with my brand voice examples. Um, then it's as good. Honestly, it really is as good as I wouldn't have been able to say this a year ago, but now it really is as good as my Tumen team was. The Opus, I have to review it about as much as I do, whether for good or bad. Like everything I'm going to say is not necessarily an endorsement of like what I want to be the case. It's just what I think is the case, right? Like whether I want whether I want it to be as good as humans or not, in my opinion, it is. Like Opus now really truly is. Um, what we do as a society now, I'm not entirely sure, but there is definitely a lot of AI writing. And it's going to be, like we talked about on the pre-call also, determining what's AI is harder and harder for both humans and AI. Right? Like it's just getting confusing because AI is getting so good. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, I understand why you have that perspective and I appreciate that perspective. I'm just curious, your thoughts with all of that coming, like maybe now we could go where are things heading in your direct, like where do you think things can go from here? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, it's funny because, you sort of changed my mind a little bit in the pre-panel call when I was talking about that, because obviously I don't want to be woo-woo about it, but part of me was like, oh, humans first, right? Like humans need jobs, and like, why not have somebody working on this versus the computer? And to your point, I mean, if a computer can do just as good of a job, where do the rest of the people fit? And so that's kind of my concern. And what I'm learning is more about how to operate with these tools and work with them and control them versus letting them replace folks like me. In terms of the content that I'm getting from people, you're right. It's way harder to discern if it's AI or not, but I think there are some obvious, I think, cadences. And so AI
Mhm.
speak, right, if you will,
M
and certainly the
dashes, yeah.
formatting. Yeah, which actually I'm really mad about because I love M dashes. I use them in my writing. And so now I feel like I have to censor myself because people are going to think that like I used AI,
Did,
but actually I just really like them.
did you actually use M dashes or dashes? Because
No,
they're
M
different
dashes,
lengths, I
I
realized.
did.
Oh, really? Okay, I
Yes,
did dashes.
yes, they
Okay.
are. Yes, and so that's been problematic. And certainly too, I mean, I use a website called Featured, similar, or maybe it used to be Help a Reporter Out. But you can actually tell, like, people will sometimes, I'll request a quote and I'll say, please don't use AI, like, please use your own words if you can. And people will actually leave their prompt, their GPT prompt in there, because sometimes it'll ask you, like, oh, do you want me
Oh
to elaborate on this further?
no.
I'm like, guys, come on.
That's
But
bad.
let's talk about that AI speak, again, it's becoming more difficult for me to discern, and to your point, if the tool is getting that good where you can't even really, tell, I'm curious if from your perspective, like, what are those signals? Like, let's say that you crafted something, you're like, what would you do when you went back into it to kind of human it up, if you will, or like, what do you need to pull out to make it feel more sincere?
Um, if you program in your brand voice, it actually is pretty good, but M dashes are still getting through no matter what. Like I always have to give a second prompt saying no M dashes. Um, and a lot of times, like this isn't really speak, but like the context gets confused, and like there'll be like just something that doesn't make sense in a sentence, like because it came from our internal conversation rather than my conversation with who I'm writing to, if that makes sense. The M dashes are the biggest, and also I don't know what you would call this, but it always will make a comparison in a similar way. It'll be like, it's not greedy, it's getting what you need to survive or whatever. That was a bad example, but it'll sort of make comparisons in a similar way. So really just those comparisons, the M dashes, and every once in a while accidentally including our internal conversations context in the email that I'm writing. Um, but that could go away with the next model upgrade. But that's what I'm seeing right now. Also, ChatGPT and Gemini is just bad writing. Like I've never used ChatGPT for writing. It's really good for research. It's really good for information. Like if you're gonna use AI for writing, in my strong opinion, use Claude. Probably worth upgrading the model and using Opus too. Like if you really are going to be emailing journalists, especially, and you don't want to piss anyone off. Like that's going to be my recommendation. And also with Harrow, actually, like help a reporter out. I built a tool, um, but it doesn't do AI writing. It helps flag Harrow opportunities that are relevant to you for you to actually respond to as a human.
I'm curious. You mentioned a couple of times pissing people off. Have you pissed anyone off? Has any journalist come back to you and been like, "Yo, this is some AI, whatever"? Like, tell me, has that happened, or has it sounds like, I mean, with your dad, for example, like you used the tools effectively and they worked. So I'm curious about that. If you've gotten any pushback.
That's a good question. There is not a single. I mean, I'm on Instagram, so I see people complaining about AI, right? Because like that's very popular on there, and social media generally. But I don't remember any time I sent an email or a LinkedIn message, and I send like 30 a day, where someone said this is obvious, like get out of here. I actually don't remember that, and I send about 30 LinkedIn messages a day, and not a lot of like cold email outreach, but oh, actually, I have one tool where I email people a screenshot of them being outranked by their competitor to try to sell SEO. And they weren't like, get out of here. They were just like, unsubscribe. But that was it.
I feel like the AI image generation is getting a lot more pushback, honestly, than the written content or certainly the data collection tools, because that still I think is so glaringly obvious, right? But even then, like even some AI photos, I think are scarily, realistic. But you, I, I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier too about using AI well versus lazy, like the lazy version of AI. And so if you're using it well, I think that's why you're so successful, Evan, because if you use it lazily, leaving your prompt on, for example, right, people can tell. So can you get a little bit more into the weeds on that about like what does it actually look like to use AI well?
Sure, that's a very good question. The first is understanding models, the difference between models, both between vendors and even within the vendors. So like there's instant models, there's thinking models, there's pro models, and you need different ones depending on your task. Um, uh, so there's that. And then it's the most important thing. Like if I had to give two pieces of advice to use AI well, it's a good model. It's a good model, like not even necessarily the right model, but a good model and the right model, but a good model is the most important. And providing it the right context. Those are the two biggest mistakes. If and it's easier to provide it the right context if you have the right context, meaning your calls are recorded and you're willing to provide them. You give it access to your emails. Whatever you're willing to give it access to is going to give it better context to produce better results, right? So the reason that I can use it to draft client emails, as an example, is I can say, look at all of our communications, and it has access to all of our calls, all of our emails. So every word that has been said between me and my client, it has access to, and it also has my brand voice, or my not brand voice, my voice, because I'm human, and it does a great job. If you do that and you give it a good model, you're going to get good results. If either of those were taken away, if it was a shitty model with good context, I would not get good results. If it was a good model with not enough context, I still would not get good results. You really need both of those.
I was just curious, are there any concerns about, security in that conversation and what data it has access to?
I mean, it depends who you talk to, right? Like it's all SOC 2 compliant. They're all, you're not. Claude says that Claude, ChatGPT, all of them are on the pro models. You're not getting trained. Um, I think it depends on who you are, how comfortable they are. Like I've kind of decided when I put all my stuff on Google that I was okay with tech companies, like having some tech companies having some of my stuff. A lot of people, if they're uncomfortable with AI, but they're already on Google, I just say start with Gemini, right? Like Google already has all your emails, almost all your documents and Drive, so start there. But also, if you trust Google, like why not Anthropic? I mean, that's like you could have that conversation. It's a legitimate conversation, but yeah, in my opinion, we're not asking people to accept new restrictions. We're just asking them we're not asking them to accept new boundaries. We're just asking them to extend it to one additional company or two. But Apple's got my stuff, Google's got my stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I just felt like I had to ask because I started thinking about it, and then I realized, like, yeah, if they want us, they got us. I mean, we're right where they want them all the time. They see everything we do all the time. So,
Yeah.
okay,
I mean,
let's get.
I will say though, really quick, I am worried about like what the government can. I mean, like I said, from a public policy standpoint, there's lots of worrying conversations. Like I'm worried about what the government could do in terms of monitoring. Like they already had the data, but they weren't able to process it as well as they're going to be able to. But the same thing with us, like the fact that I did find black hole math as a non-physicist or mathematician. Like we're all about to have really crazy capabilities, including the government.
Cool. Well, I don't want to like jump too far down that rabbit hole, so I'll bring it back. I just had to ask for due diligence, but let's go back into the content process. We talked in the pre-panel call about the scaffolding, using the multi-agent research to SEO research to brand voice to human edits. Why is that process and chain of command so important?
Each one improves the quality. So like initially, like I mentioned, if you use a good model and it has good context, you're going to get good first draft. But every iteration you do beyond that is going to improve it. So like a second round of fact checking can't hurt. Especially a second model or a second vendor. Like if something really important, I actually will, this is a little complicated, but for people who know what terminals are in your computer, you could actually have Claude and ChatGPT talk to each other in a terminal. So if something's really important, I will do that and I'll have them fact check each other. And I'll say, before you even give me a response, get a second opinion from the other model and then provide me a response. But really, like, every model is good, no model is perfect. And if you run things by all of them, you're going to get better results. Like you're going to not necessarily better. This is where not being lazy comes in. You're going to get the information as a human, and then you're going to have to make the decision, right? So Gemini may say, this is my recommendation. ChatGPT gives a recommendation, and Claude gives a recommendation, and then you as the human need to make the decision. That's how I do a lot of like the vibe sciencing that I've been doing, is just asking all three models something and then taking them to another model and sort of shopping the ideas around.
They're your committee. They're going to give you some thoughts and then you can make the decision. I'm the same way. I think that people are too trusting of what AI is giving them. I mean, there are plenty of times when I'm doing, for example, keyword research, I'm building outlines for SEO, and it'll suggest something and I'm like, I've been writing about cannabis for a long time. I know better than you, I think, at this point. So I'm going to switch that. And I think too many people take it literally. Would you say that's still the case? And that's an example of how people need to improve their use case?
Yes, for sure. I would say 100%, especially when it comes to, again, just being lazy and just asking one model. Like you probably can get to human level results of like SEO, like as an SEO agency, I can even say like you can get to human level strategy and expertise, but not by asking one model the question. You have to shop the question around. You have to give them the access to the information and the tools. And you as a human have to do that. So like you can sort of be an expert in something that you're not an expert in, if that makes sense, through that shopping around process, but you have to do that. Like you can't just ask a model something and then trust it blindly.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit more about the SEO discover shift. Obviously, that's impacting me quite a bit in terms of the traffic to my publication. And Google has really shifted the content. And we actually talked about this a little bit, but it was at one point content written by humans. And you pointed out that they've changed it to for humans. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yeah. Google changed their policy late last year from content written by humans to content written for humans. And now they're looking at very similar stats. Like they want to make sure that people are staying on the page and engaging with it and sharing it. But they themselves don't care if it's written by people as long as it's still useful for people. In terms of where things are going, I think a lot about this, and I really am not sure. Like, there's going to get to a point where information, like providers of information, whether it's the Weather Channel or you, like the news, if they can't make money, they're not going to be able to do what they do, and then they're going to have to charge for the data, right? Like for the information. And I'm wondering, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm wondering if like a future customer of yours is going to be Claude and ChatGPT, whereas like the AI models have to pay you directly so then they can serve the information to their customers. Because right now they're sort of living in this world where they can just be a bridge and pay for that and get paid for that. But that's not going to last much longer. Like as the businesses start failing and they still have to provide the information. So I'm really curious how this is going to like roll out. Personally,
I hadn't thought about that, but I think that would be an interesting thing to have happen. And obviously, publications need revenue, terribly. And so if a lot of our revenue is driven by our traffic, that could maybe help bridge that gap, so to speak. I don't know if that'll happen. I feel like these companies are getting what they need right now, and then they're just going to continue getting it from other places, whether they're just scraping Reddit or, whatever it is. But then the quality of the information could go down, right? And I think that's
right.
a conversation that we had a lot in our pre-panel call about trust, and I think that's one of the biggest issues with what we're seeing right now is aside from the deep fakes and whatnot, but just how do you actually know what's true? And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but can you really trust the answers that Claude and GPT are giving you. So how can people be more discerning? I know that's a topic we're going to get to later, but just from your perspective.
And this is going to be a very ironic answer, but I think, again, like so many things, it cuts both ways. Like the amount of times that I've used ChatGPT, especially because it's a good researcher, to fact check and actually correct my view on the world, is probably more times than I saw something fake. So like, I think, again, not to just repeat myself, I think a lot of it's going to be understanding how powerful AI is and how to use it. Because it's so powerful, that's going to have to be in your toolkit to actually discern what's real and what's fake in a weird way. Like it's ironic to say I'm going to ask ChatGPT what's real, but that has actually been what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm getting more factual answers now by doing that than I did before ChatGPT. Like when I was just on Instagram, like now I actually will screenshot memes, send them to ChatGPT, and say, check this and the actual facts, and it will cite stats, and I feel like I have a clearer picture of the world. But also the fact that AI is creating a lot of fake garbage is also true. So it really, I think, is not to just keep repeating myself, but I think it's both. It cuts both ways, and it's going to be how you use it. Like it's going to be easier. I think in the future, it's going to be easier to be fooled, and it's going to be easier to be correct. It's going to be easier to be a business owner, and it's going to be easier to be unemployed. There's just so many double-edged swords coming up, in my opinion. I don't have any, sorry, that's not a real answer, but I don't know if you have a less gray area explanation or a more bold answer.
No, I think you're right, and I think that's the nuance is there, and that's something that we're just going to keep coming back to as this topic continues. But let's give some more actionable insights to the audience. It's mostly marketers and communications professionals. So what should they be doing right now? How should they be utilizing these tools, and what should they be changing about how they do their business?
Number one, everyone needs to get Claude. They need to upgrade it to either the $20 or $100 a month plan, whatever you're on. And then they need to go to the connectors and connect every tool that you're willing to connect. And I would also say probably get an AI note taker. But if you do those things, your life will be improved dramatically. You'll basically have an assistant that will do a lot of the annoying work for you. As an example, I have Claude connected obviously to my Gmail. And right before this webinar, I was like, oh shit, I got to get the link to my speaker link. And I was doing something else and I didn't want to spend the time on both of those things. So I just asked Claude to do it. And it was like, here you go. Here's the speaker link. You got to call in 15 minutes before. So join in 3 minutes. I was like, sweet. And if everybody just gets Claude, connects all your tools, by tonight, you will have a pretty good assistant.
Yeah, I need to explore Claude more. I've definitely been more on the GPT side, but you're making me feel excited about Claude and its capabilities.
I can explain real quickly the difference. So ChatGPT, I'll make it really quick. So ChatGPT is really good for research. Claude was first to create Claude Code, which is, agentic coder, which people probably heard a lot about. And to create coding, like Claude Code, they had to create a very agentic system, meaning it had to be able to focus on a specific task for a long period of time and use a lot of different tools and strategies to accomplish that task. And people started using Claude Code for agentic work, for doing actual work. And so they realized that, and then they created what's called Cowork, which is Claude Code to do work for you. And so that's the reason that Claude sort of evolved to be more of a worker than ChatGPT has. And now ChatGPT is catching up.
Yeah, it seems like it's a real arms race with these tools, right?
Yeah, for sure. I trust Anthropic more too, so I like them, but it is definitely an arms race. Yeah, every time a model release comes out, it's like everyone switches their new favorite team. But what about
Let's
you? I'd
talk
be curious,
about
like from your standpoint, what's something that people should know about how to use AI or not use AI? Like from a journalist perspective, if they're pitching reporters.
So if they're pitching me, I guess, so one thing that we talked about earlier was where's the meat of the story, right? And does AI know that? and you can train it all you want. And what exactly, I guess to me, it's like, where does that line blur? Right? It's like, okay, you are feeding all this information into the AI to create a pitch, but why not just feed me the information? Is it just the polish? Like, what is it offering? I love what you were talking about, how you were like, okay, let's find, journalists that this topic could be relevant to, who are engaged, who are friendly to this topic, right? I think that's really useful. But when it comes to the meat of it, it's like, why not cut out the middleman, I guess? And so, that's kind of one thing that I'll ask folks. And again, about trusting too, right? Like, is this really the best version of you? That's what I'd like to see, because to your point earlier, I can't always discern what was AI and what's not. And, maybe it's not as problematic as I thought if someone sends me a PR generated or an AI generated pitch. It's more like, is there still a human behind that? And where does that trust go?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And also, dude, like just the algorithm shift, right? I mean, it's impacting my business in a really big way. And so I think it's going to be even more important that people support niche trade media. And I think we talked about this too, that media is just going to get more and more niche, which I think is going to be really interesting. And I think nowadays too, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, it's less about the publication and more about the person and the journalist. And I think that there's a lot more trust built with the person versus like the broader brand. Like, you are the brand as the journalist and the content creator. And again, because it becomes more holistic, right? I mean, people are finding me on Instagram, they're finding me on LinkedIn, they're finding me on Reddit, and they're finding me on GreenState. And it's all like, we're building an ecosystem. And actually at the Ignited conference in Chicago, we talked a lot about that on the media panel, about how, for example, in-person events have become so crucial, right? Because you can get that face time with people. You can actually have them experience your product and meet you and trust the real you and see the real you, not just, who's behind the clod, right? And so I think that's what's going to be really interesting in the media perspective, and sort of watching this second revolution of media play out. First we had internet, that kind of killed print, and now we're seeing AI dramatically shift the media landscape. And it's a scary thing. And it's also exciting because I do feel like, in a way, and I hope that this is the case, that people will become more discerning and more trusting of their favorite reporters and want to support them. And when it comes to monetization, I know a lot of people are moving to Substack and, even nonprofit models for media, and as a way to continue to run the business. But we have to think outside of the box. We can't fear this tool that exists. We have to understand what it is, learn how to use it ethically, and then adapt. And I think being in cannabis, obviously, like, we're all really used to that as it is. So, but I feel like, yeah, you have to be. And so, yeah, so I feel like, I'm interested. I'm excited in what it can do for efficiency purposes and for research. I'm still anxious about deepfakes, and what it's doing to the business. But I think, to your point, people are just going to be more creative, and tell their stories in a more authentic sort of way, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, agree. I really like what you said. Is this the best version of you? I think that's like a really simple way of everyone could ask themselves before they put something out, say, written. Did you use this to get it out, or did you use it to activate this best version that you could as a tool? And that really clues line in mind. Like, people can ask them if they're using it the right way.
Right. No, exactly. I'm
Cool.
curious if we wanted to open things up for Q&A at all. I don't know if Chris had any questions from the audience.
Yeah, I would invite anybody to pose their questions that they may have. This has been an amazing conversation. I learn more and more every time I have conversations like this, and this was super insightful. While we're waiting on any questions to come in, I was wondering if we could possibly address some of the ethical concerns with AI. And Evan, as a business owner, the thoughts between, hiring, rehiring, or laying off, that kind of thing. And, Rachelle, any kind of ethical concerns that you may have.
Yeah, so I mean, luckily, I initially did not have to worry about that because I was like right time and place in a weird way, in the sense that the cannabis industry's money, like all the marketing money, was leaving, and that was out of my control. right at the right time that AI was coming in. So even though my team shrunk dramatically, I didn't really have to lay people off. Like it kind of just was natural shrinkage, and then I used AI to fill in the gaps. It's becoming a little bit more of a thing now where I can be like, all right, like now I can give somebody hours or create an AI tool. And it's hard, honestly. I don't. I mean, I don't know. I think about it on a regular basis. I mean, one, I'm a firm believer that humans should not have to like I capitalism does a lot of good things. Like, you know, like you probably couldn't get a cup of coffee without a dollar bill that could be exchanged, you know, between everybody. But I don't believe it's like the best system for human happiness either. And I think that we're likely going to get to a point, hopefully, where AI makes people's lives easier. But it's probably going to be very rough getting from here to there. And I don't know how the economy is going to handle that transition. How that plays into me, like as you can see, like it's just really hard. I don't know. Like I think the economy is going to a place that's going to get rough, and then it's going to get better. I don't want to participate in that, but also I need to make a profitable business, and that's like, so I don't know. I don't know. It's something that I juggle, and I'm kind of like in between on. You know, I have to make sort of decisions case by case. But generally, my advice to people, you know, is that it's going to be easier to be a business owner and easier to be unemployed in the future. No matter what I say or what I do, that's just the case. It's just how it's going to be, and that everyone should transition and be ready for that. That's really how I feel.
You have conflicting concerns as a business owner versus, you know, a public citizen. And, you know, when you're wearing those hats, you know, how you address ethics. Rachelle, anything from your end?
And a techie, I'll just say that. Like I geek out over this shit. So like I want to build this stuff. You know what I mean? Like just to be clear. And then I'll stop. Yeah.
I mean, there are a few layers for me that come to mind. I mean, the first and obvious is just, you know, people's jobs. You know, people are concerned, you know, and Evan, you know, you mentioned that. And I do believe that people are turning more toward AI, both to create content that a human being once wrote. And it's also because traffic is going down, revenue is going down. And that's problematic too and can lead to layoffs within our industry. We're already seeing it. So obviously that's concerning. And also, at least in cannabis and media, both, honestly, the landscape is often shifting. We have often had to pivot. Most of us have had the rug pulled out from underneath us at one point in time or the other. And so I think that we're a very, very scrappy and resilient group of people. And so we are becoming more creative. And that's why I think you're seeing more creators lean into social media and other ways to get their information out there. You know, obviously the censorship aside, right? And so I do think that there are solves for that. You know, it's hard when you are relying on a regular paycheck and benefits. And also, there are always ways to get the information out there and to monetize that. So I like that we're seeing more creativity. I will speak to quickly about the image. I want to talk about images really quick. And understanding from a legal perspective that, you know, we're already seeing cases with people involved in litigation because of AI images. And where did that image get pulled from, the source material? You know, and there's copyright concerns over that. So I will caution anybody who's using AI to generate images to be cognizant of that. You know, that's something that we absolutely will not touch. Not just because of the ethical concerns with human beings, but also because from a litigation standpoint, you know, we can't guarantee that that image was not copyrighted at some point in some variation.
Yeah. That's insightful. Evan, I guess this mostly is for you. For folks on a limited budget, it sounds like, you know, if they do have a limited budget, try to put those dollars towards Claude, but are there any other tools that you would prioritize along with Claude if you are on a limited budget?
I mean, if you're on a limited budget, AI generally is going to be the best investment you can make. You know, like I mentioned, I had a team of like 26 employees. I think my $200 Claude Max plan does about as much work as like 70 to 80% of what that entire team was doing before. Like, again, just the truth, whether you like it or not, like, you know, so if you have a limited budget, I would say like dive as hard into AI as you possibly can, and probably all of your budget, honestly. Like, I mean, if you put all of your budget into AI, into Claude, if you only had a $200 budget and you put all that into AI, into Claude rather, you would be able to have a website. You need hosting, but you'd have a website, you'd have marketing, you could have an assistant for email management. You'd have everything you would need. That's all you need to run a business nowadays, to be honest.
Yeah, it's almost like
To
you
run
need to
some businesses. Sorry.
Yeah. It's almost like you need to reconsider how you're budgeting, and kind of reframing, what AI is as a cost, and not just thinking about as a marketing budget, but it's kind of almost your labor budget as well, and just reconsidering how you're allocating money across the board.
Yeah. And just to like put a point on it, another point on it, like I had a friend actually who said, if AI cost the same as humans, which would you prefer? And I thought about it, and I reluctantly would prefer the AI. Like, it actually does a better job. It does a quicker job. So it's not even like you're necessarily sacrificing quality if you're doing it the right way.
Interesting. I appreciate that honesty. I'm sure most folks would say people but when you actually think about it, yeah.
I mean, as a boss, like, I mean, as a person who's trying to manage a business, AI is easier to manage. Like, you tell it to do something every day and it'll do the same single thing every day. You can improve it, you can tweak it. Humans will, because they're humans, rightfully, they'll make their own judgment calls, and they'll be like, oh, I should do this instead, or I should do that instead, or whatever. And I mean, public policy, yeah, I wear many different hats, and I don't want to have that opinion for what that means for the economy and everything, but that is my opinion. Like, that is my opinion, is wearing my business owner hat.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's I'm going to be thinking about that one after the call, about that. Well, we're coming up on time. Any last minute thoughts or any suggestions for the folks in the audience? And if anyone has any questions, feel free to pose them. Reshelle?
I'll let you. Well, I guess for me, again, this is a really complicated subject, and I'm trying really hard to embrace it because I know it is the future. And as a journalist, it's incredibly useful tool for fact checking, for getting research, for disseminating really complicated information. So when I'm writing about a study, for example, I can put it in the system and explain it to me like I'm 5, so I can really break it down, pull out the points from this study. And also it's impacting media in a scary and very interesting way. And instead of being fearful, I'm trying to be excited about the future and what it means for me as a creator, and allowing me to actually get out of the box a little bit and reach people in a more organic sort of way. And I think that's just where media is heading in general, and getting just really, really just far more niche and far more localized. And I think that's interesting. And so I don't know, I'm very, very interested to see what my career will look like, in the next 5 years, because it is shifting. And for all the folks out there who are concerned about it, who are in my lane, I encourage you to be creative and to see what can this do for you, instead of, what will this become in a scary sort of way.
Yeah, it's the only option. It's like the only way to have a comfortable future, is having that mentality, in my opinion.
Yeah. Any last minute thoughts, Evan?
Nope. I think those were great.
Well, thank you both so much for this. This has been great. Look forward to seeing you at MJBizCon, and I'm sure we'll have you on stage, and we'll share more of these insights.
Thank you so much, Chris, for hosting this webinar.
Of course.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
And if anyone has any questions, I'm on LinkedIn and easy to get a hold of. I'm happy to chat with anyone.
Awesome. All right. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.